Welcome to VUC 2019, Visions Under Construction.
Yeah, there's so much under construction that, let me see, how can I fill this? All right, first thing we have to do, this is VUC747 for April 12th, 2019. And the first thing we're going to talk about, as always, we're going to shorten this because I'm too tired to go on. Kamailio World, big attraction. Get there. If you're there May 5th, there'll be a few people partying. Sunday. Monday, 6th to 8th, there will be Kamailio World with all those great presentations. And you can meet a few people. There's going to be lots of interesting things. I don't have a schedule yet. Don't know if the papers are ready to go, but that's about it for that. We're going to skip the other ones, go right to the camera where you can see how incredibly beautiful I am. And then I have a soundcloud.com/Randulo that you can check out. Meanwhile, we're going to focus on Corrado Mela. He's here.
Right. Good afternoon, evening, morning. Small point on Kamailio World. On the website, I've seen the schedule, whatever you want to pronounce it, of the events is already on the website. So there is a boat trip around Berlin on the night of the 6th.
Right, first night. Actually, that's great too. We've taken those before. Let me present Jay out in Arizona. Jay.
Hello. Howdy.
We're going to go through the weeks from everybody because I have absolutely nothing. Well, I have a couple of things, but they're pretty lame. Michael Graves out in Houston.
Hello. It's warm here. Ooh, dog's coming in.
How warm? Because it was warm here.
Well, can't go to centigrade in my head anymore. Broke 90 Fahrenheit on Tuesday or Wednesday. And that's sort of, you have the vernal equinox and the autumnal equinox. Well, it's kind of like that. When we drop below 90, that's a good benchmark in the fall, and going above 90 is the benchmark in the spring.
I think it's in the 70s here, which is very good for the spring. Let me get rid of this text. Or I'll just flash it a couple of times so everybody notices it. No, seriously, save setup to camera. There we go. Don't include videos. Include videos. Okay, just one quick thing. Everybody knows that Google Plus died. It's no longer available starting April 2nd, which was a couple of weeks ago. But that G Suite continues to have Google Plus. But hey, they renamed it. You'll never guess what they renamed it, though. Google Currents. It's called Currents. And some of you may remember, because I use this stuff. Jay's smiling. Maybe he remembers this. Currents was a way to publish news. They had a publishers section. Or maybe Michael remembers this. It died. It was killed in 2011. Google's so clever about names. Shit, let's just use this. It's, nobody's heard of it since 2011. Let's just reuse it, Currents. They are so horrible at naming. There's two things Google's no good at: user interface and naming. So the rest they're fantastic at. Anyway, what has everyone been up to this week? I can tell you that I slept almost not at all last night. And I think it's evident by the slurred speech, which I'm trying to improve by slurring it more. Corrado, you were working hard. What are you doing?
Working hard or hardly working, of course. I'm experimenting tonight using a different browser for the Hangout. Of course, it's built on the core of Google Chrome, but I'm using Brave.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't tried it. I told you about Brave, but yep. I've never tried. I've always tried to do Chrome because, as you know, Hangouts on Air will not work with Firefox. I think it does work with Edge or whatever that thing is now. Works because
it's using Chromium as Brave is as the engine.
Oh, so Edge uses Microsoft uses Chromium now.
Yes.
Did not know
they've given up because
so there's two worlds: Firefox and Chromium.
Chromium is the engine, and there's another. Michael, what is the name of the engine behind Firefox?
Oh, that's a good
By
question.
Mozilla, yeah.
Jay, do you remember that?
I don't.
No,
I can't remember.
Gecko
Yeah, well,
or something. Yeah, but
hang on a sec.
He'll find it. But anyway, Firefox, pretty decent browser, but it does not do Hangouts, so I can't use it for this ever.
No. Probably because Hangouts use the QUIC protocol.
HTTP 3 or 2 or what? I can't remember. That's the new one, right? Quick.
Yeah. It's HTTP 3 probably, but yeah, quick. QUIC, that is a protocol using UDP instead of TCP. It's a protocol using UDP with some traffic control on top in the QUIC, so on another level of the ISO stack.
There used to be great jokes about UDP. You remember any of them? Knock or something. No, there were some very funny jokes about that.
It's just so peculiar that what we're really talking about here with Quick is you're talking about things moving through the network stack vertically, right? Things that used to be in one layer are now in another layer, and it's funny what passes for innovation, I guess.
Change.
Yeah. Anyway, the 7 levels of the ISO stack still stand. Things move up, but that is still standing. Besides, well, the usual level 8, that is the carbon-based life forms that interfere with the stack, or the PEBCAC problem.
Actually, I thought level. I'm not sure exactly what I had heard, that level 8 and level 9 were money and politics.
Okay, yeah, possibly. Another thing that happened, but we were discussing before, and I launched it through the Ether, is the Matrix data breach.
Right.
That happened on the day of my birthday, occasionally, randomly. I wasn't. I was working on that day. I have my alibi, so it wasn't me. But we're going back to the mantra that a secure computer, the only secure computer is a computer is completely disconnected and powered off. And everything is secure until the next security breach.
Air gap. You know, a friend of mine had a problem with her computer. This was years and years and years and years ago, maybe Windows, God knows what. And so I took it to our office and I turned it on, and somehow, soon as I put it on the network, there were prompt boxes coming up on every one of our computers. You know, it wanted to connect. It was really funny. And I just, pretty much ripped the network cable out, but that's the only time I've witnessed that. And it's pretty crazy. So we came close to infecting everything.
Well, I remember at the time of what was that application on Windows 3.11 that you could send messages on the network. It was constantly spamming everyone.
Oh, NetBUI protocol or something?
Yeah. In that type of message on the internal LAN, you could send messages, but the APIs, let's say, the DLLs were available to anyone so anyone could write a virus that could pop up things.
Right. Here's the 7 layers in French.
Oh, en français.
Physique, liaison, réseau, transport, session, présentation, et application.
Oh, yeah. It's peculiar that the French are using transport.
That is transport, isn't it? So that's in English too, transport layer, right?
Yeah. And session.
Presentation, session. Yeah, that's right. That session would be another word in French normally, but
yeah.
Session, well, they use it. Réseau means network, liaison means liaison, connection. Physique is the physical layer. That's easy to understand.
This is interesting to me. I don't deal often with this stuff because I'm an application level guy. But I have a question about this because I heard somebody bought some IP cameras and they had a problem with them. The problem was the cameras were randomly changing their MAC addresses. And I thought, what? Aren't MAC addresses hard coded into the interface nominally?
They can be spoofed.
Well,
on purpose. No, but I mean, people.
Yeah.
That's done on purpose to avoid. It's actually a security thing, right?
Yes, on cameras it can happen because you don't want your camera to be on the same MAC address, and you can get an ARP spoof, and you get your camera taken over. So that's something you have to take into account in your if you're using switches in the network. You need very dumb switches or better. Old-fashioned hubs,
right?
That literally forward everything. Otherwise, you'll get into problems.
I remember hearing something very recently about iPhones when they connect to Wi-Fi networks changing their MAC addresses, and that was on purpose, like I said, to avoid anybody latching on. By the way, Corrado, you probably of all people know this business of the ASUS thing. The big the rootkit or whatever it was that went out from the factory or intercepted in shipping.
There are a number of features for desktops that are aimed to enterprise, and there are low-level interfaces that are available to computers before booting. They're in the BIOS, basically.
Right.
You can access the computers from the BIOS, and even computers that are off but are set to wake on LAN, you can take over and take control of them through those interfaces. There are many different brands, HP, Dell, Asus, anything that is enterprise geared has that kind of layer.
Right. No, I was talking about the Asus. It was discovered that there was a totally hackable, it was Asus laptops. This was just a few weeks ago. And they determined that only certain MAC addresses were hacked. In other words, there was this kit that came out of the factory or was intercepted when shipping, like the Cisco thing. And the point was that there were hundreds of thousands of these units shipped, but they weren't all hacked. Only certain MAC addresses were targeted. And it was thought that these were specific, I don't know, maybe government things or certain businesses or espionage or something. So I found that interesting. That was kind of unique aspect. In other words, the back door was there for these people, whoever was responsible. They think it was a state, China, but I don't know. But the interesting part of that was that it could be targeted to specific MAC addresses. So again, that's one of the reasons you want to be able to change your MAC. And I remember cable modems. Michael, you got a cable modem. I'm sure you do too. You guys probably all do, actually. Back in the day when we had one, I know that you could change the MAC address. There was a button there or something, or some way to spoof the. Or a lot of routers have that too, don't they?
Yeah.
The DOCSIS protocol. The modem itself doesn't have a MAC address. Is the MAC address of the router or the device that you attach to the modem. If the device is a modem router, there's a MAC address in the router part that is used as the marker of the unit.
But you can change it in a lot of these things. Apparently, I remember a field where you could. Or
you can change it since Windows 3.1 in the properties of the adapter, of the network adapter. You can go in and change the MAC address of the card.
Why would you do that other than if it's been compromised somehow, I guess?
If you want to change an IP address that has been issued by DHCP and is an IP address you don't want for any reason, you want to change it, force the system to change it.
Just for people who have no idea what we're talking about, by the way, this is an address that's part of it is coded for the hardware manufacturer, usually the first part, and the rest, it's a unique hardware address. Just like however you pronounce IMEI on the phones, they have their own address for various reasons, but there are also reasons. Well, for one thing, on your Wi-Fi, you can limit it to certain MAC addresses, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure routers allow you to do that.
Yeah.
So you can say, okay, I only want which would allow you could run Wi-Fi even open without a password. But if you filter for MAC addresses, it could only be the devices in your household.
Yeah, of course.
You have to be pretty geeky to
Unless
get
someone sniffs
Right.
the packets and gets your MAC address, because it's when you establish the connection before encryption, your MAC address is, of course, is in the packets.
Which you can do, yeah.
You can also set simply without blocking DHCP, specific MAC addresses or authorizing, so whitelist or blacklist, simply issue DHCP addresses only to fixed MAC addresses, pairs with DHCP addresses, and not issue any random or free DHCP addresses. That can be bypassed simply putting a static IP on a device that you want to connect. But again, MAC addresses are usually the first three tuples. The first three pairs are the manufacturer. Then usually the manufacturer uses the next two or three to identify the device, make and model. And then there's a serial number using all the rest.
And if I'm not mistaken, sometimes routers or boxes that you get from your ISP use a MAC address as a password. I'm pretty sure I've seen that too.
Especially when you get routers, modem routers, or whatever, how you want to pronounce it, from large ISPs, they connect through a protocol that is called TR069, 096, I don't remember again, but they broadcast, I'm MAC address XYZ, and you're issued your profile, speed limitations, and your public IP address provisioned on the basis of your MAC address, because supposedly is unique for every device on the planet.
And that's what we're discussing here.
Yeah.
Keyword.
The fact that it's not.
Supposedly. Well, you can spoof a MAC address of a device and try to log in like as another another user. But in that case, the Radius server would know that there are two devices logging in from two different connections with the same login. And you can stop that happening.
But what happens then if it sees two identical MAC addresses? That obviously cannot be the case. So does it say no, or does it kick the first one off?
Different levels again on SOSI. The provisioning simply sends back, because you could disconnect your modem and connect it to somewhere else. The provisioning says to the modem, your username and passwords are these. It's connecting through a different telephone line. You could have a security that, okay, that username and password is bound to that telephone line. If it's coming from another PSTN telephone line, you don't accept it. And you also can check, well, is there another device that is logged in with those credentials? If there is, you can block the second attempt, or you can disconnect the first one, because it could well be a ghost, a login that has expired or has not yet expired but is no longer valid, and so on. That's all policy that you decide.
The lease, yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy world we live in, right?
It's
so
complicated.
When it was dial in from the phone and cost you $800 an hour. Or pounds, if you prefer.
CompuServe.
So let's see, Brexit. All right, we are the 12th of April. The limit was going to be the 15th. Now it's what?
No. It was due to be yesterday or today or whatever, and it's the end of October, with a review in June. And if by any means at any point between here now and October something happens, that happens. So if the parliament and the government agree onto something, and Brexit can happen, it will happen. If it doesn't happen and they need to withdraw Article 50, they can, and they remain in the EU as before, probably with a bit less of karma and credibility. But if nothing happens and we again kick the can down the road further, and well, they up to the end of October, that's the cliff edge, and whatever happens, that's the end.
What's going to happen? So on the signatures, because we reported on this last couple of weeks, 6,075,355 signatures as of a few hours ago.
Yes, but that has already been debated in a committee, and they said
they don't care.
No, they don't care. But in fact, it's redundant because there's a court case that has in the High Court, or the European Court of Justice, I think, that says, yeah, you can revoke Article 50 whenever you want. So the every premise of avoiding no deal or anything, it's just a decision for the UK government to go without a deal, not using the tools that they have at their disposal.
And the big point is the Irish question. Is that it? I mean, is that the biggest problem? Is what are we going to do?
No, that will solve itself very quickly at the moment of Brexit. Simply, the border no longer stands, and the border moves into the Irish Sea. Because that's what happens. If everyone in Ireland, including people in Northern Ireland, agree. So the public opinion is, in case of Brexit, Ireland reunifies.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's public opinion. What the government agrees to do is a completely different matter. But generally, the people have a certain level of power. However, the biggest problem is the rejection of Brexit in Scotland is now at 73%. So 3/4 of the people polled say that we don't want to leave the EU. And the biggest gap, the biggest break, the biggest border is between England and Scotland. But it's not that much into England. There are areas in England themselves that are looking at the things in a different way. Opinion polls say that even in England, there's a majority now to remain. There's European elections on the 23rd of May. They must happen.
Yeah, but you guys don't have the right to vote in those elections. That irritates me.
Europeans, yes, I can choose to elect to
well,
vote in my...
I hope you can vote, but I don't see how, they're leaving and they can vote. What is that crap? Get out of here.
No, until the UK is in EU and has not completed the Brexit process,
they're out for me.
It's bound to have European elections.
They're out for me. I don't recognize the UK anymore. Anyway, I think Scotland should separate, have independent rule, and that's the end of it. They join the EU, Ireland too, if they want. Ireland's already in. It's Northern Ireland. That's not right.
I have a question. I mean, it's very interesting to me. Well, thank you for saying that about Ireland, Corrado. I mean, it makes perfect sense, accepting that it's one of those things where the plane of the population and the plane of the political class are not in alignment at all. And so what would happen if that actually were to occur? It's almost like a revolution without shots being fired, or would it come to that in some regard? I mean, that's a very curious thing.
The fact is,
stalled at the border.
No, the fact is that at the moment there is no border between Ireland, that is in EU, and Northern Ireland, that is in the UK. There is no Schengen controls. There are no passport controls, at the opposite of when you fly from any European country into mainland UK, so Scotland or England or Wales. When you get at the border, the tunnel, the ferry, or an airport, you have to show the passport. It doesn't happen in Ireland. So the normal course of action and the least impacting continuation of the status quo is to continue that. So unification of Ireland for business,
but
for politics.
How does that cast what they formerly called the Troubles. I mean, do you have a return of that?
Well, there's the Good Friday Agreement that has been signed quite a long time ago that practically sanctions that in case of the Northern Ireland wishing to reunify with Ireland, that's the policy that they can do that.
So it could be trouble-free, literally.
It should be trouble-free. The biggest trouble would be for England to make without the natural resources that come from Scotland, because Scotland has over a third of the natural resources of the UK. We have just 10% of the population. It's 34% of the landmass, 60% of the coastline.
And what percent of the whiskey?
Well, 100%, of course.
100%.
And
you'd have to do without gin, though.
I know about 70% of the gin is manufactured in Scotland.
Wow.
Because we have the stills, and when you're not making whiskey, they are perfectly good to make gin. And because if you set up a new distillery, you have a gap, because the minimum aging, I think, is 3 years before you can put the whiskey you made on the market. You have 3 years of expenditure that you need to cover. What do? You distill gin and you sell gin because you can sell it immediately. So there's plenty of new small artisanal distilleries that are producing gin.
Excellent. And will there be, because of Brexit, a haggis shortage in the world?
In fact, haggis was impossible to export to the US for a long time because
that's because we won't buy it.
Probably because nobody.
Because of mad cow disease, and if you don't eat haggis, you're losing quite a bit of your life.
I'll take chorizo. Thank you very much.
Really, no haggis. Oh,
really? Really, you're wasting your life if you don't taste haggis.
Yeah, it's funny coming from you. That is really funny coming from you.
Right.
So haggis is.
I'm a gourmet. I'm a Mediterranean. I'm an Italian. I know good things and I taste good things. Well, I've eaten shitty things, but haggis is not one of those shitty
Haggis
things.
is something to do with sheep's gut stuffed with the intestinal. What is it?
No, it's just offal, the general leftovers from the meat.
Right.
So it's lungs, it's
yuck.
It's the classic sausage, right? It's like you don't ask what goes into the sausage grinder. You just enjoy the sausage.
There's oats, and those that are good ones have the oats soaked in whiskey.
So it's like blood sausage, actually, right? Something like, I think.
Well, we have black pudding that is blood from the pig.
But it's kind of similar to that. I don't know what animal it comes from, but it must be a little bit similar to. It's
very coarse. Because there's oats inside, and the meat is ground quite large. No. Absolutely, I can guarantee you is absolutely delicious.
No, that's not. I don't do offal. First of all, offal is awful.
But anyway,
I do chorizo though, Michael. I'm with you. Chorizo for me. My brother corrected my pronunciation, by the way, because in France,
chorizo is lovely.
Yeah, in France, they say. Everything in French is the last syllable, right? So it's chorizo here. But my brother, I was talking to him on the phone. He goes, "It's chorizo." So in Spain, it's probably something else. But the point is, I've always called that bacon for adults.
Bacon for adults.
Stuff. No, it's so good. It's made with, I think it has chipotle in it. If I'm not, Michael, you'd know that.
I don't. But it's like if I have to go for a Mexican breakfast, that's
Well, there's
it's not Mexican, guys. It's Spanish.
Well, it's Spanish, but there's hot and there's like mild. And
if it's made with paprika or chili.
But paprika, but the hot paprika from Spain, whose name I've forgotten, but I used to know it because I have some upstairs.
Yeah,
it's spicy, and it's based. I think it is based on. I say chipotle, but whatever the equivalent is in Spain. A hot pepper.
Yeah. Generally.
Hey, Jay, how are you doing with your Raspberry Pi?
Well, after a lot of wrestling this week, I successfully installed FreeSwitch on there, but it's kind of a bare bones minimum, and I don't know that it'll actually process calls. So it's been a learning experience this week, but I do have FreeSwitch on a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, and it does seem to be working to some degree. Not all the modules are installed, but yeah. So that's part of what I've been playing around with.
Did you load it on Raspbian or did you use something else?
No, I actually use Raspbian, which, for all intents and purposes, in this context, is the same as Debian. So, yeah. And so I watched a lot of videos, and I did a lot of installs, reformat the SD cards, reload, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I feel like I'm making progress. Have you ever tried it? FreeSwitch on a Raspberry Pi?
I have not. I've only done a few things on the Raspberry Pi, and the things that I've done were more or less packaged, like they were Raspbian with the applications already loaded. So if it booted, you only had to go in and configure it, either via shell or via web interface. But I'm surprised at what you can do. I mean, the Pi does some interesting things. I see there was a new Raspbian release in the last week or two, and that's kind of interesting because it carries a newer version of Chrome and whatnot with it.
Yeah. Can you run Chrome on it or just Chromium?
I'm not sure, but it's a newer release in any case. It was like 72, where it was running something fairly vintage before. I don't know. One of the nice things about the little micro SD cards is that you can always sort of, swap another one in and rebuild it anew with something else.
I think that's a big advantage. I love the fact that I can set up something on one SD card, pull it out, put another one in, and basically I've got a whole new DevOps, basically, which is pretty nice. But I installed FreeSwitch from source, and I watched a little bit of I think it was 2013. Ken Rice was on here installing FreeSwitch on a much older version of the Raspberry Pi. That wasn't a whole lot of help, but it was interesting. It's always encouraging when you know something can be done. It kind of gives me a little boost to continue hacking away at something. So anyway, yeah, that's part of the.
So what do you aim to do with it? What do you aim to do with it once you've got, like, the real question with FreeSwitch is sort of how much media processing will it be able to do, which that'll be hardware constrained probably, but FreeSwitch is pretty light, so it's not like you're running Asterisk on it.
Intelligent answering machine, right?
Well,
intelligent do not disturb. Remember, I keep saying it's Imodium. I can't remember Iodium, whatever those. The first year of VUC, we had the guys on who had the thing that connected to your Outlook, your Outlook calendar. I mean, that concept was brilliant. I love that concept, where it knows what you're doing and it knows, you give it a notion of who's important, and it routed calls accordingly. And it would, in other words, it would shunt. The example was it shunted your mother-in-law immediately to voicemail, whereas that client you've been chasing for 3 years, would immediately break into your consciousness. So that's something that you could do, certainly easily do, with FreeSwitch on a low power computer, I guess. But then there's...
Yeah, I don't really know. I'm sort of exploring all the different pieces of FreeSwitch. I haven't tried running, WebRTC and video conferencing on FreeSwitch on the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. I'm hoping it's a little better than the 3B. Fundamentally, I want to just terminate some lines to Raspberry Pis running FreeSwitch for toll-free telephone number call answering and blah, blah, blah.
Who are you using, Jay? If it's not an indiscreet question, you don't have to answer, by the way, if you don't want to. But curious, because SignalWire has this ridiculously low price for DIDs, and that could be something you could be doing probably since they're just starting out.
Yeah, I'm trying to digest SignalWire at the same time. I wanted to start with FreeSwitch. In both instances, there's either a lack of documentation or the documentation is spread out all over the place.
Well, when I mention SignalWire to you in particular, or to people like you, because this is what I do, SignalWire isn't meant to just be a terminate, what do you call it?
They're not just an ITSP,
right? It's not just an ITSP. They have a whole other purpose, but because we're friends, I have a couple of DIDs, and I just use them. They're connected to my Polycom or whatever, but Google Voice. But the point is that it's so ridiculously cheap. It's like a penny a month almost. It's not that. It's some ridiculously low price, so that you can have several numbers if you're trying to experiment, and then you just use you use endpoints. Your FreeSwitch would be configured as a SIP client, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, well, I might end up there, but I'm looking to provision and process calls from my toll-free numbers versus their toll-free numbers. So that's a big difference.
You already have toll-free numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know. By the way, I'm not using toll-free numbers. I found that in life these days, people don't care that much about toll-free because they're using their minutes, indifferently. I know that's probably against, because I've heard you have a toll-free philosophy, but I had a toll-free vanity number for years. That was my nickname, 858, my nickname, not 858, 855, my nickname, right? 7 letters. And I don't think I got one call other than me testing. I told people, hey, call me anytime, say, toll-free. People wouldn't call that number.
Toll-free numbers, and I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've been active at the industry level, part of the Future Numbering Working Group and champion papers there and all that sort of thing. Currently, toll-free telephone numbers are, neck and neck with fax machines and pagers. So, I'm not sure which.
It's not a positive thing, I think, which you're just.
Well, but
they exist. No, I mean, there's a purpose. There's a purpose for that.
Well,
on your website or whatever, right?
Just so you and others understand that I'm not completely insane.
We know that.
Close, but not completely. I think there is an opportunity around, not only toll-free telephone numbers, but regular telephone numbers as well, where they could actually eclipse the desirability of internet domains. However, it's going to take some fundamental innovation at the level 8 stack of politics and money in order to get there, as well as some technology innovation. So anyway, that's my set of windmills that I'm tilting at this point. So
okay, here's what the FCC. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. This is what the FCC has to say. Well, the FCC, by the way, when I was a kid, the FCC, boy, ham radio and all that, man, the FCC, the authority. Now it's so risible what they do and who they are. No strength, no bite, totally, lobbyable. So they have
see, everything that you're showing there, Randy, is
from 1925.
Yeah, it's antiquated. It's dead. There's.
How are they assigned?
It's hardly worth. So, hold it right there. See that warehousing, hoarding, and brokering toll-free telephone numbers? That's in the process of possibly being updated, so there would be a market for toll-free telephone numbers. And that's a key piece to usher in a new realm of innovation and use cases for toll-free telephone numbers. But most people consider them dead, dinosaurs, blah blah blah. And without the marketplace for toll-free telephone numbers, they indeed will be dead, in my view.
I don't think they're dead because, you know, they're a little like Fox News. They're for people 55 and over. I didn't mean that politically. I just mean that who watches TV news anymore, cable news? It's very rare. No one under, I say 60, but.
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I just wonder. I was thinking. I thought to myself, maybe their value is that they're non-geographic.
Yeah.
But we have other non-geographic numbers, and given number portability, is anything geographically tied anymore, right?
I mean, you're on a cell, it's minutes, regardless of what you call, isn't it?
Well, for example, I have services that I can sell that come with every single channel you buy, 5,000 minutes of calls to any UK destination, landlines, mobiles, headline mobiles, and whatever local area. And I can supply whatever local area number you want. Yours or anywhere else, or a 03, that is a national number. So the geographic connotation of a number has lost meaning, and the value of a toll-free number is the appeal of having a toll-free number is limited, because practically people are already calling you free because they're paying a $5 a month to have a telephone with 10,000 minutes or unlimited minute calls on their mobiles. So the calls are getting commoditized at a point where a toll-free number probably, if it's not for the fact that can be a mnemonic number, if you choose your digits right, it has no added value to the very end user.
The biggest value, so if we just take the United States as an example, and you could answer this, Jay, but I think that if you say 800, if your name wasn't Carpenter, if it was shorter, so it's 800 J Carp or what?
Call J.
J Carp would be CRP. That would be 7 digits. So if it was 800 J Carp, if your name was Carp, that would be valid because the 800 stands out. But as soon as they had 888, it gets confusing. And in this country, I have to tell you, I look at these numbers that start with 8 because they same thing. Here it's 08 something. Well, some of the 08s are free. Some of them are 50 cents a minute to 50 cents to establish, and so a minute, which is annoying as hell, by the way. You know, Hewlett Packard and companies like that, when they had a new printer, they would have a billboard and they have a number that was not, it was a surtax number, and you would call to get information on their printer, which no one likes this, but people did it at work. So, anyway.
Well, so
800, though, do you agree 800 is the gold, actually?
Well, to take it up a level, I would say when I make a call to somebody, a telephone call, it's like I've almost offended them.
Well, that's a whole other, yeah.
You know, so the means of communication that this whole VUC communities, you know, lived in for decades, that is out of the modes of communication, you know, asymmetric or, you know, emails, texting, web, blah, blah, blah. At the very bottom of the stack is a telephone call. And in my view, that's just kind of my experience. And then at the bottom of telephone calls is the toll-free telephone number call. Because I don't even answer them if I see a toll-free telephone number that pops up on my caller ID. That's like a do not answer.
Totally. But see,
signal.
That them calling you, it's obviously some commercial crap, right?
Yeah, right.
This is obviously something that you didn't ask. Well, that's not true. Sometimes you did if you answered some kind of infomercial. But generally, you're right, 100%. I get those all the time. They're total crap calls. A lot of times this is the final courtesy call for you. And I mean, these are Google Voice numbers that have never had a real human being behind them anyway. So whoever these commercial entities are that are called, anyway, yeah, sorry. I just want to agree with you that when you get a call from a toll-free number, forget it. No way.
Yeah. So why in the world would I be spending my time, last week building FreeSwitch on a Raspberry Pi and messing around with all this blockchain stuff and all this? The reason is because I think there's a way to create a whole new naming, addressing, numbering, and identification system using these antiquated things called telephone numbers. And so that's basically what I'm at work on. And I continue to be optimistic about that. In fact, I think the possibility and the probabilities are much, much greater today than they were like 3, 4, 5 years ago. So suffice it to say that the bottom line is these antiquated things, this whole antiquated construct we call the public switch telephone network and telephone numbers, the dinosaurs of yesterday, I think could be the darlings of the future.
There may be something there. There may be something. I know you've been working on this for a long time. There may be something somehow to get a channel. You take somebody like James Bodie, he's got 10, 20, probably more phone numbers that he's actually, I mean, he's got hundreds of them, but the ones that he's actually connected to, he's got devices connected to that might answer. He's probably got between 10 and 20. So you have no idea what number you should call. Then you've got all the Apple universe, like I have one too. Because I have an iPod and I have an Apple account. So you could theoretically call my iPod using an email address, right? Or FaceTime it. You could FaceTime my Mac too. So this numerous channel thing could be resolved by everybody having a phone number, especially if they were vanity numbers. And if it's going to be 10 numbers, by the way, are we going to run out of 10 number? Let's see, 10 numbers is plus the country code, right? 10 numbers plus, well, that's not even true worldwide, is it? In the United States.
There are countries that have 11, 12.
Right. No, but I mean, besides the code, right, because in Germany, hotels used to, I don't know if they still do this, but used to be able to call a hotel and then direct dial the room by adding that number to the actual telephone number.
Because in Germany, they have been using ISDN for a very long time. So every extension of any phone system is in fact an ISDN extension, and you can do what is called, I think, post dial. So the first digits get to the PBX, the internals PBX, and the exceeding digits after the number are passed directly to the PBX, and the PBX routes the call directly. That's how ISDN works.
Do you remember that there used to be a thing for texting fixed line phones? I don't know if you guys had that in the UK.
It's still working here.
We had it here, and plus there were 10 for your phone number. If you had the right kind of phone, it could have 10 mailboxes, I think, or something close to that. So you could, every member of the family had their own text mailbox. Boy, that I don't think anybody ever really used that. But it's a funny concept and it's clever.
The system is still in place. If you accidentally text a landline number and they don't have a text phone at the other side,
it reads it to you, right?
It rings you and it reads you the message in a synthetic.
So if you do that, if you do it in Italian, if you send a message in Italian to an English number, that should be interesting.
That should be, probably a bit.
I think I've had that. I think I've had that happen actually here. But the point is, we had a phone. When you bought I mean, this is the funny thing about consumer technology, is if you go to your electronics store, the big electronics stores where they sell phones, at any given time, they're going to have the phone that's, like a Philips or those kinds of phones. And those things, at the time when that service was being touted, your thing had those 10 mailboxes. Well, it was like 7 mailboxes or something, because there was some other thing with the codes. I used to mess with those for asterisk, because since you could detect that number, you could do different commands with it. It's pretty fun. But those were the fun days. That's where the VUC hit its prime, actually, is we were screwing around with, calling. I was in Spain. We called my asterisk thing from a phone booth. It didn't answer, but it made a note of the thing and called me back with a phone line into France. So we really thought that was, oh man, free. But now you're roaming in Spain with your own cell and it's the same price. So, why run your asterisk service? But anyway, those were the days.
Does someone remember Blueboxing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll give you, before I was involved with VUC at all, I used to listen to this is sort of slightly peripheral, but to Dan York's podcast with his former partner. He had a podcast that was called the Bluebox podcast on voice over IP security. And after that was when he still worked for Mitel.
Oh.
No, he worked for Mitel before Voxeo.
Right.
He actually lived in Burlington and worked for Mitel out of their Ottawa office. But they did that for a while, and when he got really busy, before Mitel let him go, they farmed out post-production on their podcast to a group of volunteers in the listening audience, and I was one of those, which was how kind of I came to appreciate VUC when I found it. But Blueboxing was very interesting, and in fact, God, what was that? The Phone Phreaker's book. Not Kevin Mitnick's book, but there was another one, Disassembling the Telephone Network, I think it was called. It was a really brilliant piece of work. Historical tale of phone phreaking. So, yeah. Did you do that, Corrado?
Yes. 1985, I was stationed in Rome during my year serving in the Italian army. And I was in a special section of the army that was the telecommunications of the army. So we had access to a number of different tools, and I had a little box that was not blue but was red, and we could use that attached to a standard phone box in any road on the microphone. And sending special tones, we could get a telephone line that we could call out for free. That's military issue devices that you simply brought with you, and every phone box you could phone home completely free.
Talk about design without security. All you had to do was send some DTMF.
Yeah,
and it was security by obscurity, just because nobody knew,
yeah,
right?
They were DTMFs, and they were in the extended range, so the famous ABCD type of those. And at the time in Italy, DTMF was not a thing. It was everything in pulse modulation. Everything was still working like that. But
it was still switched. Oh,
yeah, still switched.
Yeah.
But the exchanges. Some exchanges, and especially those serving the public telephone networks, because they had to account with coins and everything else, they had to transmit digital signals in and out for tolling. They were pre-programmed to get that. For emergency services, the military, and everyone else that could make a free call practically with that little box.
So an interesting story. I saw Kevin Mitnick about a year ago speak at a conference, and of course he was prosecuted for phreaking and telephone phreaking and all that. And the prosecutor was telling the judge that Kevin Mitnick should be jailed, because if he wasn't jailed, he would be able to pick up a phone, whistle into the phone, and launch intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Oh well.
So
okay.
Talk about what a story is that. Everybody knows in order to launch ICBMs, you got to have a floppy disk. It requires a floppy.
And Windows XP to run.
But yeah, it's. I mean, that's the story that he gave at this conference, and it was crazy. So anyway.
Another thing of note that I've read this week that goes with what we're discussing now, finally, Windows XP is dead, people. It is, even in the POS for kiosks and the XP embedded platform. Microsoft has finally decided it's time to euthanize the operating system. My question is, what happens with the Vanguard nuclear missile submarines that the UK has here in Scotland, because they ran on Windows XP?
That's a good question. There's a lot of this in the world, though. There was a story not that long ago. I was trying to find it the other day and I couldn't. It was about a radar site in Maryland. It's an uplink site, and you go in and it's a rather nondescript looking building, but you go in and you look at it, and there's like a rack room, and it's got reasonable security for the rack room and stuff. Then you go inside and there's a military cage where the US military has their uplink downlink equipment concealed, and you go inside there and literally there's a bunch of like 1980 80s vintage stuff, and the problem that they're having, and the reason they got attention, was that they were struggling to find the floppy disks that they needed to keep these things running, because they boot to and run from floppy. They're that old, and the systems are considered mission critical, so they can't be decommissioned. Yet they've never been upgraded. The manufacturers are no longer in business, and they're kind of stuck. And I can't remember what they were looking for. I think it was like single density, single-sided 5 1/4 inch floppies or something like that.
I was going to ask you what size of floppies we are talking about: the 3.5, the 5, or the 8-inch floppies.
I don't think there were 8-inch. I used 8-inch floppies in the first videotape editing system I ever used. So it was a PDP-based thing. So we used 8-inch flop, and the floppies were considered an upgrade from our paper tape punches and readers.
Yeah, or the stripe. Or the card and everything else. We are that old, yes.
Gentlemen, I have to sign off. I apologize, but
well, it's almost time.
Yeah, Jay, thank you for
conversation
and contributing. Yeah. And we're just about done here. I was going to just ask everybody if they had a final thing. Jay, you should give your URL for the desert blockchain or whatever.
Desertblockchain.com is the URL, and we're going to be doing a session which will be live streamed next Wednesday on decentralized voting and zero knowledge proofs. And I'll actually be doing a demonstration on that. And that same day, I'm going to be speaking at the Arizona State University, Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, along with Congressman David Schweikert and Joshua Boehm from Perkins Coie, and we're going to be talking about identity, privacy, and decentralization. So that's what's coming up.
Very cool.
Anyway, enjoyed it. Thanks, and look forward to next week.
Okay. Take care.
Goodbye.
Who else has some last words before we bring up the satellite to bring down the link?
I have just a little anecdote. I used to work for a very large retailer in the UK, just in stocking shelves in spare time when I had some, and they used to print the labels that go onto the shelves for the products with a totem that is usually sitting, and you can still see them around the stores, connected to a computer. And I happened to have access to that computer, and it was running, and it was 2008, and it was running Windows 95.
Perfect.
And it was connected to the internal network of the store.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it was receiving all the prices for all the all the products, everything that you could print, and all promotions and everything to print those, and it was running on Windows 95 with WindSock 2.
Oh God, Trumpet WindSock or whatever.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys remember, well, you probably do, just how revolutionary Windows NT was when it came out. How it was, thank goodness it was stable. Yeah, it was beastly, but it was stable.
Windows 3.11 for workgroups.
Right.
Does someone
Well,
remember that?
You may not realize it, Michael, but the real secure thing wasn't exportable. Here in Europe, we couldn't get the.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
I didn't use Windows 3.11, Corrado. I at the point when that was going on, I was using OS2, and OS2 was running Windows inside of it, 3.1, and OS2 was like having a new kernel underneath Windows. It was lovely, in fact. I would have carried on using it had they not thrown in the towel.
Yeah, if it wasn't, it was bound to a different hardware platform, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to remember the add-on cards for OS2 machines was some sort of ecosystem.
Well, back then though, you had like ISA cards and EISA cards and things like that, and VL bus cards were brand new and fast. That was before PCI caught on, and but it was lovely because it would run. I remember the travesty. They got into so much trouble because it really absolutely needed 2 megs of RAM to run, and it didn't run well until you had 4.
Wow.
I think I still have an installation CD for OS2 somewhere.
I bought a book on OS2, and I think somebody who had something to do with it actually was either a VUC listener at one point.
Yeah, no, I ran that for the longest time because it had preemptive multi-threading,
right?
And all of my Apple buddies were like, "Oh, my Mac has just crashed," and the whole Mac would fall down because it was not preemptive multi-threading, and it was bad. Anyway.
Okay, let me bring down the satellite. Here we go.
Copy, Kevin.